Hello, I'm McTage from Fly-Carpin. Today I'm going to show you the drag and drop presentation. The drag and drop presentation is an awesome tool for catching carp. It's the best way that I know of getting around the dinner plate paradox. And what I call the dinner plate paradox is the fact that typically in order to catch a carp, you need to present the fly very close to its head. But at the same time, if you actually cast a fly within 6 inches of a carp's head and it hits the water, the carp's going to spook and you're not going to catch that fish anyways. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You got to get the fly close, you can't get the fly close. So what do? You do the drag and drop presentation. And the basic principle of it is really simple. Instead of casting directly to the carp, you cast past the carp, draw the fly across the top of the water column until you get it where you want it, drop the rod tip, give it some slack, and let the fly drop right in front of the carp. Like I said, it's really simple, and we're going to show you some of the details right now.
Okay, so now some details about the drag and drop. First thing to understand is that it's much more of a lob cast than it is an overhand cast. Right now I'm doing a kind of a water drag, boom, and I want just the fly to land, because I don't really want my tippet to land on the water and scare the fish. That's the whole point of the drag and drop, is to land away from the fish. So it's much more of a lob cast than it is an overhand cast. Okay, so what that means is, if we're looking from the side, that my rod has much more of an arcing pattern than it does a straight back and forth pattern that you do for a classic overhand cast. Okay, so if I'm gonna overhand cast, let's try and do it, I've got much more of an arcing pattern, more break of the wrist. Okay, and just if I do that, just my fly lands first. I'm essentially lobbing the fly there. That breaks down at distance. The further away you get, the less you can lob it. It just doesn't work. That's part of why the drag and drop only works at close range. Okay, so once again, I'm going to kind of lob the fly, and just the fly is going to land. Let's see if I can do that from a little bit closer to show you. At close, let's do a close range drag and drop. So I'm going to lob the fly, just the fly is going to land. Lob the fly, just the fly is going to land. Drag it, drop it. Okay, so I just put that in the 1-inch circle, okay? At this range, I can do that all night long. Lob it, drag it, drop it.
I can do that all night long. Lob it, drag it, drop it.
Okay, now let's look at the same cast at about 24 feet. At 24 feet, I can be really accurate with this cast. It's really effective. It works great.
Good. Good.
Now let's get into some details about the drag and drop. One of them that I'd like to show you is the idea that because you have this step in the process where you're dragging the fly across the top of the water column, there's nothing that says you have to drag that fly straight across the water column. If you happen to have cast a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and you're just a little bit offline, you can easily correct that during the drag phase of the drag and drop. That means that you can correct for some minor errors in the earlier cast, and it really kind of desensitizes the whole process to being extremely perfectly accurate in terms of being online. So let's take a look. The second detail that's helpful is that just by its nature, once you've completed the drag and drop and you've presented the fly has a little bit of slack on it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next clip.
The thing about the drag and drop that's pretty important is so when I lob it, I drag it, I drop it, the fly has slack. And it's kind of important that the fly has slack, particularly for passive carp that are going to try and inhale that fly, because they're counting on dragging that fly at least a couple of inches into their mouth. When you cast a fly and you strip it through the dinner plate, that fly is under tension, and your stripping and the tension on your line is preventing the fly from getting sucked up. Okay? So for passive carp, a lot of times they'll try and suck up your fly, and if you're on a tight line, they can't get it because it won't move as much as they want. Okay? When you drag it and drop it, there should be slack. Okay? So I'm dragging it, I'm dropping it. There's going to be slack, and the carp can move the fly if he wants to.
All right, so let's talk about the end game. What do you do after you drop the fly? All right, well, first let's assume that the fish is going to eat the fly. All right, you're going to want to do a set of some kind. If you go to do your set and you have too much slack, there's going to be a big lag between when you lift the rod and when it moves the fly. All right, so you don't want too much slack. You want a little bit of slack like we talked about in the last clip, but not too much. What you can do about that, and it's a little bit awkward and it can mess with your timing, but if you can, as you're dropping the rod or immediately afterwards, it's good to do a couple of small strips to remove some of the excess slack. Okay? I'm going to show that in the next clip. You'll see it towards the end. Now, the next thing is, assuming that the fish eats the fly, which you should always assume that the fish ate the fly, the next thing is we're going to trout set. Now, the drag and drop is typically done at 30 feet or less. Okay? At 30 feet or less, I also typically stick with a trout set. I personally feel that it is just much, much more effective for carp, especially at close range. At anything over 30 feet, I'll start to work in a strip set, and definitely at anything 40 feet or further, I strip set almost everything. But at close range, trout set is almost always more effective.
Once again, wide open casting motion. Just the fly hits, drag it back, drop it, get a little bit of slack out, set the hook with the trout set.
Okay, the final detail I'd like to talk about is range. There really is an upper limit to the range at which this cast is effective. Anywhere below mid 20 feet, this can be extremely accurate and repeatable. It was no accident that I was able to show you those previous clips of me hitting the screwdriver. I was pretty much able to do that just about all day long below 24 feet. Now, somewhere between 24 and 30 feet, it really starts to break down. Your angles aren't right anymore. You can't drag it slowly. You can't really make the same lateral corrections that you could at closer ranges. And it just becomes much, much more difficult to put the fly on the dinner plate. In about 15 to 20 tries, the next clip was really my best effort, and I barely made it on. So let's take a look, and maybe you can kind of get an idea of why it's so much more difficult.
Now I'm going to move out to about 30 feet. You can still do it to 30 feet. Much past 30 feet, the angle starts to get a little bit difficult. You can still do it, but it's hard to drag the fly slowly because of the angle that you're at. Let's see how I do at 30 feet, and let's go.
Alright, there's the drag and drop. I really recommend that you go practice this and learn it. A lot of my clips might help you catch a carp or two. This is really a game changer. This is one of those techniques that can really change how you approach carp in general and help you catch a lot more fish. Enjoy.